Hi, everybody. Jason Thibodeau here, branch manager of JMJ Financial in Huntington Beach. I have with us today Mike Grambo, also out of our branch here in Huntington Beach. We're both loan officers. Joining us today, special guest, we're really excited about this one, Tony Cuda. He's our underwriting manager, director of credit. He's the guy that makes the world go around in our world. It took me 15 years to find an underwriter that I truly enjoy working with, and that is Tony Cuda. He's the guy that basically changed my life, right? Loans are hard on a good day. So having somebody to take things to the finish line in a way that makes you feel good about what you're doing for the borrower and for yourself, it makes all the difference in the world. So Tony, just super grateful to have you on. Thanks for making the time today. There's going to be a lot of hype around this call and on this topic. Last year, CALHFA came out with something called the Dream for All program. And I remember Mike did a video on it and it blew his phone up, right? The amount of interest in that was through the roof. I can't remember if it was 300 or 350 million that the state allotted for this last year. Now, a lot has changed this time around. It's coming back out. So let's call it Dream for All 2.0. I believe it's going to be around spring busy season, more or less, that it gets reintroduced. But the first time was more of a test or a beta, if you will. There was a lot of learning that came from that because I think it only lasted 9 calendar days or something like that, the amount of money that was put out there. There's going to be a few more strings attached to this version of it, and that's what we're going to get into today. What does a homeowner or a prospective homeowner, I should say, need to do to be prepared to take advantage of this? We want to have a real estate agent and a first-time buyer or regular buyer leave this podcast feeling confident that they know what steps to take to be eligible and take advantage of this. Okay, so I'm going to let the two of you do most of the Q&A because most of you are smarter than I am on these topics. I'll facilitate as I see fit. And Mike, why don't I let you take it away with questions?
So I'll just start by overviewing. The program is an equity share program that's going to give up to 20% in down payment assistance. It's no interest and deferred payments, so the person doesn't have to make any payments. And in return for that, they're going to share in equity what they borrowed. So if they borrowed 20% for down payment, any appreciation they get, they're going to share that 20%. So that's the same as last year. This year, they are capping it at the lesser of 20% down or $150,000. But Tony, do you want to touch on maybe some of the key differences from last year and this year?
Absolutely. Some of the key differences, like Mike said, was the max now at 150. So that's going to get us up. If we did a $750,000 purchase price, we can max out the program at 150. Anything above that, they're going to be limited to 150,000 on the second. Some of the key changes, and the biggest thing is they are going to require the borrower to be a first generation home buyer. And what that means is the borrower cannot have owned a home in the last 7 years. Their parents cannot currently own a home, and could also, and that's if their parents are deceased, they couldn't have owned a home at the time when that they were deceased. The third option to meet the first generation home buyer piece would be if the borrower was ever in foster care. So they did throw a carve out in there for kids that were in foster care at some point. So that's probably the biggest change because that's really going to reduce the borrower pool. The second biggest change is that they're going to a lottery system. Last time we did this, it was a first come, first served basis. And now we're going to a lottery system to where probably, like Jason said, in the spring, they're going to roll it out. I think it's going to be April. And they're going to have a registration desk for about 30 days. And everyone can go and register for those 30 days. And at the end of that, they're going to complete a lottery and select the borrowers that are eligible for it. It doesn't matter what time that you get into those 30 days. It could be day 1 or day 30. It's not going to change anything. The people getting in on day 1 have just as good a chance of people getting in on day 30. But what they're also doing is spreading this out through California. With it being first come, first serve last time, there was a lot of areas that pretty much had no borrowers that took advantage of the program. So this year they're going to spread it out through California, and I think per county they're going to sort of distribute it out at that point. One thing that they did mention too is if you currently live in LA County, but you're going to end up buying in Riverside County, it's going to count towards LA County's numbers whenever they're looking at the split up. Those are probably the biggest changes from last year, and the ones that's going to help us, or I should say, hurt some borrowers from actually being able to take advantage of the program.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about the first generation piece because it's probably the most controversial part of it, right? So I think it's important for people to know that this was part of the state legislation. Like, this is why these funds are now available and just a requirement for CALHFA. So CALHFA is the entity that's running the program, but it was really the state of California that did this. And the intent is to bridge the generational wealth gap, right? And I just thought it was a really interesting point that I think that there's things you hear online that people say, oh, buying a home is an old American dream. It's not the American dream anymore, and it's not what it used to. You can rent this and that. And here, the state of California is saying, no, actually, we think it is so important to bridging the generational wealth gap that we're going to give $250 million to people to help them buy their first home. And they have to be a first generational person in order to do that. So curious your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. That their comments in their board meetings at CALHFA, they felt like they did not help the people on the last round that they were really trying to help. Some of the lower income people, they feel like with some of these restrictions, they're going to be able to help some of the lower income areas and that kind of stuff. Last time it was sort of free for all a little bit, and people, while they were able to take advantage of the program, I don't think it quite helped the people that CALHFA was hoping for.
Tony?
And on top of that too, what they're saying is the reason why they have the parent ownership, because they feel if the parents own a house that they can pass that house on to their kids and still create that generational wealth. So that's why they put the requirement in there for the parent not owning a house as well, just because again they're trying to keep families being able to hit that generational wealth. So that was a big change, and it's going to stop some borrowers from being able to participate.
Is there an income limit, Tony?
There are income limits, and CALHFA has typical income limits for their normal programs. They actually lowered these. Their normal program has 150% of the AMI, area median income. They've lowered that down out to for the DREAM program, down to 100% of the AMI. In Orange County, where I'm at right now, I think that came out to be about $202,000 annually for borrowers on the loan. All borrowers, only one borrower has to be a first generation borrower, but all borrowers have to be first-time home buyers, which is not owning a house in the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, right? They don't both have to be first-generation home buyers. And I think that first-generation home buyer thing is where most of the confusion is going to come into play.
I agree.
One of the questions that was asked when we were on the training was if the parents are no longer alive, if they're since passed, but they were a homeowner when they passed, what does that look like? And the answer that they gave us was that disqualifies you. You are not considered a first generation home buyer. They could have passed away 15 years ago, and if they owned a home, your parents, then you're ineligible. So it's an interesting thing where I think it's super important for people listening to this to go directly to us with your specific scenarios, right? And we can figure it out using Tony's help, going direct to CALHFA to see what's eligible. The other piece that, with everything that was shared just now, you mentioned the registration period is going to be coming first, and then a lottery based upon geography, and the state of California will be selected from there. But that registration piece, what do they actually need in order to register? Like, do they have to be pre-approved, or is there any things that they need to do to be prepared to register?
Yeah, so the process is going to go like this. They're going to reach out to a loan officer. They're going to reach out to Mike Grambo, and he's going to pre-approve them. He's going to offer them, CALHFA has their own form, so he's going to fill out this form showing that the borrowers are pre-approved for the program. Then the borrowers are actually, once they open up the portal, the borrower themselves is going to go into the portal and upload that documentation showing that they're pre-approved for it. And that's going to get their line and get them in line for the program. And like I said, it's not going to matter when in those 25 or 30 days that they have the portal open. It won't matter when that you get it. But at that point, they're going to have a lottery system based off of all the eligible borrowers. They are relying on the loan officers to actually pre-qual them and make sure that these loans are going to be eligible. The good news is that they also are going to have a wait list. So there will be some fallout. Some borrowers, maybe their credit scores change or their income changes over over that time period. Once you get a voucher, it's going to be good for 90 days. So, that's why I say there will be a little bit of fallout, and there's going to be a waiting list for some borrowers to maybe take advantage once a few people fall out. But generally, that's how the process is going to work.
Copy that.
And I've received calls already this week. This is a hot ticket, right? And people are asking, when should we start this process? And I've been telling them today, because for a few reasons. One, just general loan pre-approval process is that you don't know until you talk to a loan officer where you stand, right? People will say, oh, I need to work on my credit. I need to pay off debt. It's like, do you? Right? You may not. It's just something you have in your head. But then also when we get closer to this, I just think we're going to get flooded with inquiries. So it's really ideal to start working on these now. And then if there is an issue, I can help guide a person on, these are the things you need to work on between now and April to put yourself in a position. If you're ready to go, then great. Then April comes around, I call you and just say, hey, I need a few things updated. I just want to make sure these things are still true. And I get you a letter, right? We're already all set to go. Something that they said on the training very early on was that Dream for All is not for everybody, and you shouldn't be waiting for it. So I think that's another point of getting an application in, is you never know when your dream home is going to come on the market. So if you have a pre-approval ready and there's other first-time buyer programs that are available and that house comes, then you're ready for it, right? So that's why I've been encouraging people, get applications in sooner than later here.
That's a great point. I mean, you really are winning the lottery with this thing.
Yes,
so if you have your dream house, and even on the CALHFA program, she even said herself, I think the My Home could be a better program for a lot of borrowers out there. You're not sharing in the equity. So if you can, make the payment currently right now, some other programs might be a better fit than this one. So definitely don't get off the streets if that's the case.
I agree with all of that. I think the reason there's hype around this is it's pretty rare, right? Where something like this from the state comes out that has up to 20% down, not gifted, right? At the end of the day, it is a loan, but it's almost a gift in the sense that it's a 0% loan, right? There's no monthly payment or interest accruing. Obviously, there's equity share, and we should probably spend some time on making sure the average person and consumer listening to this really understands that part of it, right? Because I don't want them to feel like, oh, they're giving us 150 grand and everything's great. There are strings attached to that. We need to know what that looks like. It's actually pretty appealing, but let's get into a little bit of the detail about how that works. Maybe use the scenario of 750,000, since that's kind of the cap if you want the full 20% down to avoid mortgage insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you did get that $750,000 purchase price and they gave you $150,000 second, like Jason said, there's going to be no payment on that second whatsoever, and that's the biggest benefit of the program, right? Now, my first loan amount is $150,000 less, and I don't have to make a monthly payment on it. The equity share piece is sort of the interest that you would have been paying on that mortgage anyway. So while they're going to share in the equity later on, you would have done that anyways, through paying interest on the second mortgage, or even the first mortgage if your loan amount was high enough. And then so whenever you go and sell your house, you're going to then let's say there was an extra $100,000 of equity. Right now they're going to share in 20% of that. So if there was, now your house sells for $850 and you had bought it for $750, CalHFA is going to take 20% of the extra $100,000 in equity. There are some borrowers that will qualify for a lesser percentage at 15%. If their income is at 80% of the area median income, they'll only take 15% at that point. So whenever you go and sell your house, you're going to pay back that original $150,000 plus this equity share. So in that scenario, if it only went up $100,000, we'd be looking at paying back, 170, with 150 being your first loan that you originally borrowed, and then the 20% from your equity share.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the important part to understand, right? It's not an actual gift in the sense that you don't have to pay it back. All right. So you are, at the end of the day, when you're selling this home, I think is the instance, right? You're paying back the original 150,000 plus the equity share of a 20%. And it sounds like there's some variance on that depending on your income, as you mentioned. Did I get that right, Tony?
It is. And also on top of that, too, they are allowing a refinance one time of the first mortgage. So
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Just one time, and it has to be a rate and term refinance. They won't allow any cash out on it. So not only sale of the home, but it could be if you wanted to cash out on your home at that point, you're paying off the equity share at that point, too. So only a one-time subordination of the second, and on a rate and term refinance. So, it's going to become due whenever you sell it or you try to refinance into a different program.
That's great to know. That's exciting because obviously with rates elevated right now, clearly at some point, rates dropping, people are going to want to refinance their first mortgage. And just to be super clear, the refinance we're talking about is your first mortgage, not the second, the silent second, so to speak.
Yeah, and then they're going to put a cap on the amount of appreciation that you have to pay back too. So it's 2.5 the original loan amount. So if it's loaned $100,000, 2.5 is going to be $250,000. So the absolute most when you go to sell your house that you could ever owe back to CALHFA is $350. The original 100 plus the $250 in appreciation. And they had this really, really cool graph where it's cool to me. I don't know if it's cool to other people, but it was cool to me in that they had a bar of the amount of equity that CALHFA had, how much the borrower had, and then your first loan amount, right?
Yeah.
And then over time, how it changes. So you got to figure that the CALHFA portion is only going up 20% of the total equity. So it's not a big amount that's growing over time. Each month, the person's paying down their first loan, so that number goes down a bit. So the amount of equity, and for those not familiar, we're talking about the value of the home minus what you owe, your equity. The amount of equity the person had, it was like a wedge. And each year it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, proportionate to the amount that they owed, being the CALHFA and that first loan amount. So it was a great visual that maybe we'll put in a different format here to just say that this loan is great, or this program is great for people that are going to stay in the home for a long period of time. The longer you're in the home, the more benefit you're going to see from it.
Yeah. And then that also help with the waves in the industry too, when house prices go up and down too. Obviously selling at a lower price, you wouldn't want to. So staying in the loan and the house for longer is definitely going to be a benefit.
But I thought real estate only ever goes up, Tony.
That's true. Most of the time you are accurate, but there are times where, we have some bumpy roads.
Just teasing. Yeah. Okay. What else you got, guys?
There was something else we talked about that's a change this year. So it's all along the theme of they're trying to get the money into the hands of the people that need it the most. So last year, you could put up to 30% down and get this money. So the loan you were getting and the one that you're actually making monthly payments on could have been as low as only 50% of the house value, right? It would have been equivalent to putting a 50% down payment, which is significant. People that have a 30% down payment don't need these funds, right? That's what it comes down to. So this year, the maximum contribution that you can do would be a 5% down payment and then pay for your own closing costs as well. So it's just another way that they're trying to make sure that these funds are appropriated correctly.
Yep, that's a good point. And also, they're also allowing it to go up to 105 CLTV. So if it is somebody that needed help with closing costs too, we could use the second loan to help out with 5% of closing costs as well.
Can you use that for buy down of an interest rate, Tony?
They do have a temporary buy down on here.
Oh, that's exciting. And that can be funded by the proceeds of this second?
I'm going to let me check on that. I don't want to state that. I believe it can, but I'll double check on that.
One thing I want to make sure the listeners understand is there's going to be some forms from CALHFA on the site, frequently asked questions, some scenarios laid out to help better understand. We'll make sure as we post this podcast that we include the links to the information you're going to want to know on and beyond what we're talking about today in the podcast as well. So just throwing that out there.
We started to touch on it, but Last year, I'd given 3 strategies of how we can use this program and then some exit strategies as well. So I'll highlight the ways you can use it. One is just you use your 20% as your down payment. That way you get a loan that doesn't have mortgage insurance. And then you use your own funds to pay for the closing costs. And that's something in the right market where you can have your real estate agent maybe even negotiate with the seller to help the seller pay for closing costs. But nonetheless, just to say, use 20% towards your down payment. And then, as Tony mentioned, you could use part of that money not all towards down payment, but towards closing costs. So you're getting a loan that has either monthly mortgage insurance or mortgage insurance up front because it's only a 15% down payment. But the advantage to that is that it's a true $0 out of pocket loan that you're using in order to get a house. And
That's
then
big time. Yeah.
And then the third way is what I was talking about with that max borrower contribution. So if you were just mostly concerned about monthly payment, and I think that is actually one of the biggest advantages to this program, it's not necessarily having the funds for down payment, but just what it does to your monthly payment. To sidetrack a little bit, I did a comparison last year with the CALHFA scenario versus just like a traditional FHA scenario. And it was just about $700 a month for a $500,000 purchase price. That was the difference between doing this Dream for All program versus just an FHA loan. So I think monthly payments, one of the main reasons that people really like this. So a person could put 5% of their own money, pay for the closing costs, use the 20% for CALHFA, and it's just going to significantly lower what their monthly obligation is on the loan. So I don't know if you guys have any other ideas on how to use it, but those are the big 3 that I saw.
Yeah. Well, the thing to highlight is if you're only quote unquote putting 15% down because you're using the remaining 5% for closing costs, what I want to make super clear on this conversation is mortgage insurance, when you're putting 15% down, is pretty darn inexpensive. Yeah. Mortgage insurance is not a one size fits all, right? I know mortgage insurance is like a 4-letter word or whatever in mortgage. There's some stigma to it. Oh, PMI, I don't want PMI, right? Well, I get it, but there's a wide range of pricing when it comes to private mortgage insurance. And in the case of 15% down, that's the cheapest version of mortgage insurance. So whatever that translates to on a monthly basis depends on the loan amount and the scenario, but it's probably a lot cheaper than I think most people realize. And then the other piece of this is you can do a single premium MI, if I'm not mistaken, Tony, where you're not paying monthly and part of the 5% goes towards just paying off the mortgage insurance and then, the remainder for closing costs. And I think what the ultimate trifecta would be is using a 2-1 buy down, assuming you can use the second mortgage funds for that. So We'll have to close the loop for people on that. Or if you're curious what the answer is, you'll have to give us a call once Tony verifies it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big thing of them. Actually, they're thinking about pushing the single premium too. So if you didn't want that monthly amount included in your payment, we could do a single premium mortgage insurance and just pay for it all up front. So that would help as well.
Couple bullet points that are important. 90-day voucher, right? So if you do get this voucher or win the lottery, so to speak, it's not an infinite amount of time. It's a finite amount of time that you have to find a home. So not to, put unnecessary pressure on anyone, but if you win the lottery, you've got 90 days to find a house, just so you know. And I don't know if that gets renewed, if they are swinging and missing or what, or how that works, Tony.
Yeah, that's what they said on the training yesterday. I could see there being maybe a little bit of room in there too for them to help us out if something got close and the borrower had already won it. But they also are going to have a waiting list too, and there's going to be people waiting there to get it. So finding that home within those 90 days is going to be a pretty big deal.
What about the required education? Or maybe it's not required. I missed that part.
Good thing. So at least one borrower is going to have to take the normal home buyer education that we would for pretty much any of our down payment assistance programs. And then they're also going to have a secondary education for the shared equity piece. They really want people to understand the shared equity piece. So they're going to have a separate education for that we'll have to complete. One of the online, they do have one course that is an online education through eHome through CALHFA. So it is an online course that we can take. They also have many programs that are in person and counseling type of programs too that would meet the requirement. And some borrowers might feel a little bit more comfortable comfortable and want to get into the details a little bit more. So I would recommend maybe taking one of those in-person ones if that's the case, but they will have an online option, I believe, for both the shared equity and the down payment
We'll
education.
include both of those links in the podcast information as well, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, the common question too of at what point in the process does that have to happen? So I'll let Tony.
Yeah, that should just be before closing, like before we send the CALHFA always does like a final stamp of approval right before you fund the loan. So the education should just be completed before you send it up to CALHFA for that final stamp approval.
Okay.
Yeah, and at least in the past, CALHFA had a fee for the 8-hour course. It's not a huge amount, but still, it's money you have to pay. And it's also 8 hours. So it seems like it makes sense to me that to make sure you have an offer accepted on a property before you spend the time and money on that education. If you have a 30-day escrow, you have lots of time to get it done. You can knock it out in the first week and be okay.
Yep.
Other piece that, want to make sure people are aware of, a lot of first-time homebuyers use cosigners to qualify. In this particular case, if you're going for the dream for all, that is not an option. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tony.
That's absolutely correct. No co-borrowers or co-signers. So everyone has to occupy the property.
Right.
There was a carve out. At least one person has to be a California resident. Currently a California resident as well, which is a little funky. I guess some people could be moving out of state as a co-borrower or something and then moving in, because obviously everyone has to occupy. So I could see, I think that's why they put that in there. At least one has to be a current California resident. Some other stuff, units, they're not allowing units, so we can't buy a 2 to 4 unit. They are allowing a single family home that has an ADU, but it still has to be classified as a single family home. They are also allowing manufactured homes, which we see quite a bit now.
Condos and townhomes and PUDs and all that, Tony? Condos
Say that again?
and all that? Condos too?
Yes.
So condos are good.
Yep. They're just basically excluding units.
Okay.
I think it makes sense that somebody has to be a California resident, right? Because these are state funds that are being used. So they want to give it to people who are living in the state that are paying their income and property and sales tax that's going to the state. Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another note I have here too is just about credit scores. Their minimum credit score is sort of going to be 660, but that's if you are under 80% of the AMI. Most of our borrowers are going to have a minimum credit score of 680. And that allows you to go up to a debt to income ratio of 45. If you have a credit score of 700, they'll allow the debt to income ratio to go all the way up to 50%.
Perfect. Yeah. And the loan they're getting on the first mortgage is a conventional loan. They're not doing or offering any other form or FHA loans or government loans. It's a conventional loan on the first for the dream for all.
That is correct. Impounds are required too, so there won't be no waiting of impounds. So your taxes and insurance will be included in your mortgage payment. So you don't have to worry about, making any separate payments for your taxes and insurance. So that's great.
Awesome. Okay, let's do one little recap, high-level overview, sequence of events here, just so we can put a nice bow on this, right? So right now it's January 25th. The program hasn't officially been launched yet, but people are in a position where they're going to be asking us, what do I do? When do I do it? How do I do it? Right? Because they're going to want to be, even if they're aware that they may not end up with this lottery win, so to speak, they want to be putting themselves in a position to get it if they can. So what does that look like? If you're giving a first-time homebuyer advice today, where do they start?
Mike, you want to take that one?
Sure. You call me, we get you pre-approved. And then that way, when the portal opens up, which is, they don't have a date, tentatively in April, then all we have to do is just confirm that your situation is the same. I get you a CALHFA pre-approval letter that you then upload into their portal. At the end of that 30-day period, you'll find out if you get your voucher. And if you do, you have 90 days to go find a house. And if you don't, then you're on the wait list. They said that they will have a wait list.
Absolutely.
Okay. Guys, we try to keep these to 30 minutes, and I think we're there. Any parting words of advice or tidbits we may have missed?
Not off my notes. The biggest thing I just want to emphasize, like Mike said too, this program is not going to be for everyone, and everyone is not going to win this lottery. So if you have a house that you absolutely love, we have plenty of programs that we can fit in with no down payment, no closing costs, whatever it might be. So don't wait around for this program if you find the house that you really love.
Great advice, Tony. Thank you. Go ahead, Mike. Wrap us up.
I think that the first generation part is going to be the piece that we're going to get the most questions around. And I don't think we've said yet that CALHFA is hiring a third party to verify this. I think they purposely didn't give us a ton of information on how exactly it's going to be verified. So just know that you're going to have to lead with integrity on this. You will have to sign a form that says, under penalty of perjury, this information is true, and they will be verifying it. So...
Not to scare anybody or anything.
Not to scare anyone, but just to say, like, the point of this is to get the money into the hands of the people that need it the most. So
absolutely,
it's all good, honest people.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll include all the links in the notes. And Tony and Mike, great job today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.